Hello, this is Sondra Oster Baras bringing you a few words of Bible from the heart of Biblical Israel. This week's Torah portion is Hukat, begins with Numbers chapter 19, and the whole first chapter gives us the rules of the red heifer. And the whole purpose of the red heifer, of course, is the ashes of the red heifer are used to purify the people of Israel so that they can enter the temple. Now, not every type of impurity requires the red heifer to purify them. The only type of impurity that requires the red heifer for purification is coming in contact with a dead person. And this is a very interesting topic. Why is it here? Of course, let's look at chapter 20. Now, if you recall, last week's chapter, we were dealing completely with the rebellion of Korach and a number of laws, particular laws having to do with the Levites that come in after that. But here, then we move to chapter 19, where we have these rules of the red heifer, seemingly maybe connected to the fact that we dealt with some sacrifices before. Okay, but there's a whole chapter about this. And then starting in chapter 20, we learn in the very first verse that Miriam dies. Okay? And we know Miriam, Aaron, and Moses all die at the very end of the 40 years in the desert. So something's happened. 38 years have passed. The rebellion of Korach happens at the end of the second year. In chapter 20, with the death of Miriam, we're already in the 40th year. So we have skipped 38 years. What represents to us this missing 38 years? The rules of the red heifer. Because what happened during those 38 years? As we learned a few weeks ago in the Torah portion of Shlach, the sin of the spies, when the spies came back with their terrible report and the nation suddenly loses heart and doesn't want to go to Israel, God punishes them that they will wander in the desert for a total of 40 years, and only their children will enter the land of Israel. So what's happened in this 38 years is people have died. Every year, people have died. So that when we come to chapter 20, the only people there are Moses, Aaron, Miriam, and those who were 20 years or younger in the Exodus from Egypt. Everybody else is dead, a completely new generation. And then, of course, the first thing we learn in chapter 20 is that Miriam dies. So it's really, really the beginning of the end. Now, so what we have is a very unusual situation. We have Moses and Aaron continuing the leadership that they have exercised for 40 years, but a completely different generation. These are younger people. And then we have this story of the water, bringing the water from the rock. After Miriam died, there's suddenly no water. And in fact, Jewish commentaries connect those two things and say that throughout their time in the desert, they always had water, and that Miriam herself was the one who, as a result of her righteousness, God gave them water. She was the one that bestowed them water because it was as a result of her merits, a result of her righteousness, that the nation had water, and therefore it's no coincidence that as soon as she dies, there's suddenly no water, and the whole nation comes to Moses and complains for water. Now, we saw a similar thing happen 40 years early, right after they came out of Egypt. They complained for water, they got water, they sweetened the water. A few different things happened at the very beginning. None of it turned into a big deal. This turns into a big deal because as a result of whatever it is that Moses and Aaron do here, God says to them, they now are not going to be able to go into the land of Israel either. Until now, we understood that the entire generation could not go in. Oh, there was another exception other than Moses and Aaron still alive, Joshua and Caleb. All right, Joshua and Caleb are the only two people from that previous generation that are still alive because God promises them because of their righteousness, they too will be able to enter into the land, and Joshua himself, of course, will be the next leader. But Moses and Aaron, the assumption until this point is they can enter the land. They've not been punished for anything. And it's only as a result of what happens here with the rock and the water that they are punished, and they now are not going to go into the land. So many people question what was the big deal that brought them this severe punishment. And of course, you can imagine Moses, he wanted more than anything to bring the nation in, or just himself to go into the land of Israel. He had such faith and he had such enthusiasm for this ultimate promise that God made to bring us into the land of our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and yet he was going to be prevented. So what happened? What exactly happened? And there are many different commentaries. God says to them, speak to the rock. They hit the rock. Is there a difference between speaking the rock and hitting the rock? Okay, but I think if you look here and you look at what's going on here, there's a lot of anger, okay? Everything surrounding, there is no anger from God, yet there's a lot of anger with Moses. So I just want to show you a few of that, okay? So first of all, in verse 3, we learn that the people fought or quarreled with Moses. It doesn't just say, in other words, in verse 2 it says they gathered around Moses and Aaron. Okay, and then it says they quarreled with Moses. It doesn't just say they complained. This is a different verb. They quarreled, they fought. There's something unusually tense that's going on here. Okay, and then they mention their normal complaints, but what's this idea of quarreling, of fighting? There's tension going on between Moses and the nation. Okay, and then the response of Moses is that they fall on their faces before God, and God speaks to Moses saying, this is what you do, okay? God is not angry. There is no place here which says God is angry at the nation or whatever. God just, cool, it's all good. Take your rod, you're going to bring the water out, as if it's a perfectly normal complaint that they have. We don't have water, we need water. God says, great, I'm going to give you water, I'm going to take it out of the rock. Okay, but then Moses they stand before the nation. Moses takes his staff, he stands before the nation, and what does he say? He looks at them, and he says, listen here, you rebels. Will I get water from you out of the rock? Will we get water from you out of the rock? Okay? And then Moses raises his hand and hits the rock. What are we hearing from Moses? Anger. First of all, he's angry at the nation, didn't only quarrel with them back in verse 2. Here he refers to them as a bunch of rebels. They're not rebels, they're thirsty. They're not Korach. Korach was already 38, was 38 years earlier. They're not Korach. They're not rebellious. They are just thirsty. And yet he turns to them with anger. And so we see here that it's anger in the way he addresses them. And it's very possible that in hitting the rock, he's expressing his frustration. It's not a significant difference if he speaks to the rock or hits the rock. He could tap the rock. All right. He hit the rock. It's an expression of his anger. And therefore, what I think is going on here is that it's not just that Moses or Aaron technically didn't do something right, okay? What does God say to them? Because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity in the sight of the Israelite people. Therefore, you shall not lead this congregation into the land that I have given them. What did they do wrong? They were angry. They were angry. You cannot sanctify God's name from anger. God wanted to do a miracle. This is a new generation. He is bringing them close to him. He is getting them ready to go into the land. This is not a people that needs to be responded to with anger. And I think what you see here is Moses and Aaron, they're old. They're old, and they have spent 40 years arguing with a very troublesome people because the initial generation was a different generation. They had come out of slavery. They were suspicious. They were not trusting. The younger generation is not like this. The younger generation is the generation that God has selected to go into Israel. I'm not saying they're perfect. There's a lot of problems with them too. But what Moses and Aaron is doing by coming in anger to this nation is that they are projecting the anger and frustration they felt with the older generation. They're projecting it now onto the younger generation. And that is when it is no longer appropriate. And therefore, God is saying to Moses and Aaron, we need a younger leader. We cannot have you going into the land, leading these people, keeping in your head the baggage, so to speak, that you bring with you from the older generation. We need someone who's willing to give these people a fresh chance and a fresh start. I think that helps us really understand what is going on here. Anyway, have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom.
I hope you enjoyed that video. And we'd like to be sure you're getting all of our video content. So just click on the subscribe button below, as well as on the notification bell. And that way you will have easy access to all our material. We look forward to staying in touch with you. God bless you, and have a wonderful day.